Believe Psychology Film Festival is happening Saturday, May 17th and Sunday, May 18th at the Cat's Crawl Theater in Los Angeles, California. Bringing psychology and film together, this event showcases thought-provoking stories that explore the human experience with depth and authenticity. Tickets are on sale now at BelievePsychologyFilmFest.com, and you can find a link in the description of this episode. Both Daniel and myself will be there in collaboration, so if you want to come say hi, introduce yourself, as well as check out some of the amazing creative work by the filmmakers and other artists, now's your chance. Hope to see you there. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Therapy by the Book. My name is William Haddad.
And I'm Daniel Villanueva.
And welcome back to May the 4th, where each month for the show we're going to be looking at character clients from the Star Wars galaxy. Last week we did Darth Vader. We went to the dark side of the Force and we dived into its depths, went to some very, very dark, very powerful places. This week we're coming back to the light side with a character from the opposite end of that spectrum.
Yoda. I mean, the complete opposite end, theoretically, right? But then like we talked about last time, they're the Force has some issues, man. It's not as cut and dry as you would expect or want it to be. And when we saw it with Anakin, we saw a lot of restrictive behaviors. We saw a lot of minimalizing people's emotions and the way they want to present to the world, and it got me a little frustrated. I was starting to see why there was people wanting to rebel against that, but then I came back around. I'm leaning towards the light again. Don't worry. I didn't go full dark side.
Yeah, we talked about, I remember the duality of Anakin's inner nature creating kind of almost a grayness to his personality that I remember thinking you couldn't really assign him to either department. He was neither Sith nor Jedi, no matter how far he went to either side at different points in his life. Well, and one of the things that one of a couple of things actually that I was surprised to learn is that in that sense, Yoda is actually not that different, either from Anakin or from Sidious.
I was thinking the same thing. It's interesting because watching the movies, I ended up watching a couple of them. I just unfortunately my schedule's crazy, so I couldn't watch all of them. But I watched a couple of them, and I did some research, looking things up. I went to it's not Wikipedia, look through that, and it's just fascinating.
Love it.
Fascinating how the similarities, and how, just like we talked about last time with Anakin, it could be that these groundings, this way to protect themselves or protect the greater good, might have gone too far. And I think, and we'll get into it, but I think at one point he meaning Yoda, realized this, and then found the gray area himself, and that was his redemption arc. Sorry, my tongue doesn't want to work today. And that's where he won me back, because I went into this thinking, you know what, you guys forced his hand. You guys, not that I justify anything that Anakin did, horrible stuff, but if it wasn't for this box you're trying to shove this guy in, he might not have become who they created him to be. Is that true? Because nobody can make you do anything, but
they would have been a much stronger support source for Anakin.
Absolutely.
They would have become what Anakin really needed, which was a family, because that's what he left behind when he went with Qui-Gon to become a Jedi, and that's what he really needed if he was ever going to be able to learn to not succumb to his inner emotional extremes.
Right. And I mean, we all have a dark side in us, and it could be nurtured in its own way. And I mean, that also plays with the theory, because I talk about this constantly. A matter of fact, I was talking about it earlier today. Is that there is no black and white doesn't exist. There's so much gray in the world. Gray meaning that there's this middle ground, not gray meaning that the world is dark and we should just lay in bed all day.
Great that it's nuanced, that it's never all or nothing, um,
Right,
and it's
and
not
it's all
about
about perception.
absolutes.
Yes,
Exactly.
it's all about perception, and
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 there's one thing Yoda's good at. It is perception.
uh-huh, exactly, and that's what I found too. Okay, so the Yoda Master lived over 900 years, which is crazy.
Look is good. He did not.
Leader of the Jedi Order during the rise and the fall. Uh, Later, kind of became a hermit, living out in the middle of nowhere. And I wrote it somewhere. I forgot the name of it. I'm sure you. Oh, Dagobah. I wrote it. Oh, there it is. I mean, lived through centuries of conflict, systemic failures, personal responsibility. He took a lot of personal responsibility for the collapse of everything that he devoted his life to. So there was a lot of pain when he came in. Oh, and a miracle happened, and he wasn't actually dead because he showed up to our therapy session. So
Yeah, yeah. I think similar. I really liked what you did last episode with Vader, where you said we're going to be getting a referral post war, post Return of the Jedi, and I'm thinking something similar with Yoda would make sense, just so we get the full picture
yes,
here.
because that's where my mind goes. It's like I want to encompass all the information, like we do, right? We tend to have a perception of very psychodynamic, very what happened, very family systems as well to try to figure out who played a role in what and where your experiences came from, your knowledge and your patterns come from. And I think to encompass everything that we know about Yoda and the people around I feel like that would give us a better, and the listeners too, a better, a more well-rounded perception of who Yoda was and or is, and what he brings to the table and why he sees the world he does, and you could see the evolution of Yoda, and we'll talk about it more, but you can see how he grows and starts to let go of some of these constraints that he put on other people for 900 years, man. So he figures it. It took him a while, but he figures it out.
We already covered the beginnings of this point, but it's worth repeating because we dove so far into this last episode with Darth Vader. It's easy to dunk on Yoda. It's easy to dunk on the whole Jedi Order, and not without some justification for the way they kind of dropped the ball with Anakin and really you could argue the Republic in general. But as you said too, there's a grayness to all these characters, just as there's a grayness to humanity, and very important to understand what made Yoda into the Jedi Master that he is. What was he doing in all of those 900 years to build him up to that point where he was so rigidly behind the ideals and the philosophies of the Jedi Order that ended up being detrimental to Anakin? Because that's a long time. That's a very, very, very long time to be alive. So, although we might not agree with Yoda's outlook and with the decisions of him and the other Jedi that led to Anakin and things ending up the way they did, it is, I think, crucial to recognize that Yoda wasn't just pulling these philosophies, out of thin air. He had more reason than most to stand by what the Order stood for, and he had, unlike a lot of other Jedi, more than ample time to sit and reflect and debate with himself, with other people, to watch the ebb and flow of the galaxy, time passing, and the rise and fall of many civilizations and many many wars, for that matter, even prior to the Clone Wars. And yet these beliefs still crystallized, and he still stuck by them, all the way up until Order 66. And that's something that I don't think one should overlook, especially if we're going to be going into session with him. because it's all about patterns, as we've talked about. It's all about looking for what brings a person, what is led a person to be, or a client to be where they are today when they're sitting down in that chair with us.
I totally agree. I think that that's where you get you get to see why they started to cut out or try to dull emotions. Because when we get emotional, when we get emotionally invested, when we get excited, when we get jealous, when we get, I'm going over nothing but sins in my head for some reason, but they're all connecting in a way, because that's what he saw over the 900 years. He saw how greed and how everything that comes with emotions, all the negative aspects, and again, I'm going to argue that there is no negative, there just is. And Yoda would, this is something he would actually say. uh, it formed his perspective on the world, and it also formed how the Jedi Order really tried to consolidate it all and keep it as clean as possible, because they knew the outcomes. Man, they knew A plus B equals C. They knew what could happen, or they have seen through experience what could happen, and they wanted to avoid it all. But I also feel that, and like I said, we'll get to it. He finally came to the realization that there has to be a balance. It's like he always preached about the balance of the force. There has to be a balance. We have to be able to exist, be our true, authentic selves. We need to be able to be passionate about something, but we also need to be humble enough and vulnerable enough to open up and say, "Oh yeah, I was wrong," or to be able to take criticism or take in information from other people, which he does, which I loved. That's what changed me on him. Made me feel like, okay, yeah, we have to have that balance. And I'm gonna say it changed me on him, guys, because uh, I was, after Anakin, I was really frustrated with the Order. I was really frustrated on how rigid they were, and it still kind of frustrates me. But yeah, I'll get over it. Don't worry.
The thing about Yoda is that despite all his knowledge and experience, he never stopped learning, or recognizing, for that matter, the need to reinforce previous lessons, not just on others, but with himself as well. And I found it very, very humbling, in a way, to learn this about him, because I hadn't picked up on this before, honestly, this
I
aspect
didn't. I
before
didn't either.
doing this deep dive, which is
No.
crazy because I saw Empire Strikes Back when I was 5 years old. I mean, I've seen this movie to the point where I can practically recite it beat for beat,
That's
if you ask me.
hilarious. Yeah.
And so again, this is like it's all connected. I'm learning that very same lesson that I'm not that I just described. That
Right.
it's a reminder that I mean, you can be 900 years old and there'll still be that need to learn something
I
new, to
love that you said
stay
that.
open-minded.
Yeah, we're always learning. We have to be always learning, and that's something that he realized, that once you hit that weird imaginary marker of, I figured it out. You're full of it, man, because you haven't. There's no such thing. We'll continue to learn. Things will evolve. Will change. We'll evolve. We'll have different perspectives, different insight, different emotional connections, and that'll change your point of view. And if you are humble, like you said, if you're open, then you can take in this information and make informed decisions. And that's what he did, and it's pretty beautiful. I would hope that this is the continued effect, and I guess we do kind of see it with. I told myself to please memorize her name. The newer, the I guess she would be a niece. She's actually the granddaughter of the of Palpatine.
Oh, are you talking about
Palpatine's
Ray?
great Ray. Yeah, you see that she has this evolution, but then you see the contrast of what Yoda and everybody else in the Order was talking about, of the wrong, the other side, where it's like, that's what we are trying to avoid. But without that balance, man, she wouldn't be the person that she is.
Yoda says, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but
Yeah,
Yoda
no, no.
says what probably might be, I think, my favorite line to ever hear him utter. in The Last Jedi when he's there with Luke. And he's just initiated the lightning bolt to finally burn the last of the ancient sacred texts from the old Jedi Order. And he says to Luke, there was, well, he says, the sacred text, page turners, they were not. But then he goes on beyond that, and he says that, Luke, we are that girl Rey, we are what they grow beyond. People like Rey, young Jedi like Rey, or Ben Solo, or other young Force users, either in the Disney canon or the old Legends canon, right, for that matter, which had a similar story arc for the new generation. We are what they grow beyond. That is the destiny of all true masters.
Yes, I totally agree, and that's the evolution. That's what we see, and that's what we would have had if they would have been less rigid about it. I think fear-based avoidance, fear-based defensiveness is what came out of all this, and that's what we see as an individual, and micro and macro. We see these responses and how they affect the world around us, and more importantly, I don't know if that'd be, yeah, let's just go with more importantly, within ourselves, because then we are, the catalyst for more macro views and behaviors. But yeah, he was calm, but he wasn't naive, man. He was smart, very intuitive, and it was hard earned. He
Oh,
lived
it was
a really rough life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, from the get-go. I mean, the thing about the galaxy was that it, yes, the Clone Wars were horrific, and yes, the oppression of the Empire was unprecedented. But this is not to say that the before all that, the Old Republic was this era of daisies and roses.
Oh yeah,
stuff,
rainbows and butterflies? No, not at all.
No, far from it. Far from it. There were wars breaking out, every couple of centuries at best, if not more often. And there were a lot of conflicts even after the Sith went into hiding. There were still a lot of major wars and strife that plagued the galaxy that Yoda was privy to. The timelines are actually kind of interesting here. Yoda, if my math is right, was born and kind of came into the picture right after the Sith Lord Darth Bane committed the order to secrecy and established the rule of two. Prior to that, the Sith were an order of legions. They were, as big as the Jedi themselves, and they were just constant. Really? Yeah, oh yeah, it's extraordinary. We should do a whole other episode on the Sith at some point. But yeah, so little exposition dump here. So
okay,
the Siths began as an order that was actually originally a native species that I think were called the I'm going to butcher this name, but the Sithdar or the Sindar or something like that. But they were both a combination of Force-sensitive beings that followed a similar philosophy to the modern Sith, and also a rogue Jedi splinter group that didn't agree with the ideals that the Jedi Order was founded on. And over time, the Sith Order evolved to become just almost an empire in itself, a fractured patchwork of Sith warlords who each of them controlled their own little sects of planets and territory, and all of them had frighteningly unique powers and legions upon legions of followers, be they Sith apprentices and acolytes, or just, mercenaries and soldiers and cultists worshiping the power of the Sith. It got to the point where the Jedi and the Republic, for that matter, began to wage open war against the Sith Order because they were so numerous and so powerful. And this was actually the first time, I think, since the founding of the Republic that that Coruscant had to deploy an army and the Jedi acted as generals. This happened over 1,500 years before the birth of Anakin Skywalker and the Clone Wars. Wow. So they fought a war and it lasted for centuries. And it got to the point where eventually a Sith Lord named Khan, who came onto the scene, and Khan was so powerful, his influence over the dark side was so extraordinary that he was actually able to cajole other Sith warlords into a coalition, which he called the Brotherhood. I think it was the Brotherhood of Darkness or something like that. and
Okay.
he actually coalesced all of the Siths into a single army, a single armada of dark side force and power to try to exterminate the Jedi. But the Jedi, of course, weren't going down that easy. The Jedi, because of long years of war, had become a lot more hardened. There was actually the Order was in a very similar state to where it would be by the end of the Clone Wars, over 1,000 years later. Kind of interestingly, parallels upon parallels here, and
Yeah.
and they fought the Sith to almost a stalemate. And it was becoming clear, though nobody wanted to admit it, that neither side was ever going to gain an edge to win a decisive victory over the other. There was an innate balance locked within these conflicting forces who were both so stuck on their ideals of light and dark that acted as a natural check between the two. Now, at this point, into the scene came Darth Bane, who was at this point, was a young Sith acolyte who had only recently ascended to become a higher Sith, a higher authority in the Order. And Bane realized that as long as the Sith were trying to work together, that was actually going to dilute their power and the power of the dark side. So, acting as kind of a black sheep within a whole, a whole army of black sheep, Bane worked secretly to undermine the Sith Order and manipulated events that ultimately led to its extermination, except for himself. He became the last surviving Sith and then took on an apprentice, a young girl named Xana, who he came across, who was a war orphan, who he sensed was powerful in the dark side. And he established what became known as the Rule of Two, which was that the Sith Order would never number more than two individuals at a time, one to embody the power of the dark side and one to crave it. And he used this aspect to shield it in secrecy until such a time as the right Sith apprentice would come along and the circumstances would be right for that apprentice to exact their revenge on the Jedi and completely take over the galaxy. Yoda was born not long after Bane died and passed on his powers to Darth Xana, who continued the practice afterwards. But I don't know how he found out, but Yoda was one of the very few individuals who learned of the Rule of Two
Okay.
post-Sith era during the millennium that the Sith were believed to be extinct for. And Yoda, like the Sith, Yoda understood that there was kind of an intrinsic balancing act linked up to both the light and the dark side. Because by the time of Phantom Menace, when Maul returned, when Maul revealed himself as Sidious's apprentice to Qui-Gon Jinn, Yoda was among the Jedi who was most ready to believe it. He was like,
Okay.
hard to see the dark side is. Whereas Mace Windu was like, I do not believe the Sith could have returned without us knowing. So all this is to say, you have this long history, you have this order of secrecy. But Yoda, despite coming into an era that should have been Sith-free, somehow understood from the get-go that the Sith, or at least the dark side, was never going to be entirely out of the game.
There is no absolutes, right? There is no perfect, and that's what we talk to people about all the time. And I think he understood that to his core. You got to remember too that, and obviously you know more about this world than myself and probably a large majority of people, which is pretty cool. I didn't know any of that, so that was pretty interesting. See, I'm curious to see what happened to that lady.
Darth
I
Xana?
want, yeah, what happened to her? Who did who did she offspring? What happened in her life? I I want to go on a deep dive on that. But with Yoda in general, like his trusted allies became his enemies. Throughout his life, his young students, died in wars and just got slaughtered. He continued to live. He continued. In the equivalency that I kind of put in my head is that what if I was born in, because 2025 now, in 1125, I would have been I would have seen it all, man. Or not at all, obviously, but I would have seen all the wars. I would have seen all the empires rise, fall, crash. I would have seen all the backstabbing, all the manipulation. I would have seen how the next empire learned from the last one, and how they use that momentum and perception and abuse to the people in order to grow in power. And then they make mistakes, and then the next one figures it out, and then the next one, so on and on and on and on. And throughout this whole ordeal, other than when he's first born, um, he's somewhat involved. He's training. He's uh, going to different meetings and meeting with people, and trying to instill um, yeah, love, connection, trust, everything that we talk about in his own way, obviously, because they're emotionally stunted, or at least they try to be, which I call complete garbage on that, because I think they are showing emotions in their own way,
Oh yeah.
and trying to mask it behind this almost kind of like the one person that we would have noticed through a pompous perception of self.
No question. Well, Obi-Wan, is even jokingly says at one point that he's just better at hiding his emotions than Anakin is in the Clone
There you go.
Wars. But
Yeah.
we learn he's not without his secrets, and he actually, we learn, has a secret love relationship with the I forget her name, but the Duchess of Mandalore. It's revealed
Oh
that
yeah.
over the course of the Clone Wars television series, the two of them have kind of a thing, more than kind of, in fact. And so Obi-Wan, it's revealed, is no less susceptible um, than Anakin to his personal feelings at times, even if he is perhaps a little better at Anakin than at concealing them from others. He's still human too, and for that matter, there's Anakin. Um, Anakin was far from the first Jedi to voluntarily abandon the Order when he turned to the dark side. Prior to Anakin, there was a series of individuals called the Lost 20, who were
Okay.
they were called that because they were the only Jedi to ever voluntarily abandon the Order after reaching full maturity within its ranks. And guess who the most recent, or one of the most recent of the Lost 20 was?
Who?
Count
No idea.
Dooku.
Oh really?
Count Dooku, who was a Jedi before he became a Sith Lord. And guess who was, well, you don't have to guess, you know this. Who was Count Dooku's teacher?
Yoda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Yoda would have been privy to, so as you said, they it is BS, because we're all feeling, it's not about, we can't shut off those emotions just because, even if we are connected to the Force, those emotions too are still part of us, just as the Force is. And Yoda would have probably been alive, very possibly, to witness most, if not all, of the circumstances leading to all of the other lost 19 plus Dooku leading up to. And then actually, I completely forgot this, but Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's apprentice, she actually voluntarily left the Order as well, right in the middle of the Clone Wars. But she abandoned the Order too, after she felt that the Council had let her down, even before Anakin's fall to the dark side. So Yoda, at that point, it's almost a familiar song and dance for Yoda, having witnessed what this rigidity of a philosophy has done to certain individuals, even if
It's a
he's never,
vicious cycle.
yeah, and he's never had to struggle with it himself. But there's no question that it had a deep effect on him, because after Count Dooku's defection, Yoda never took on another individual Padawan learner. He stopped training.
Ah,
This is, I've always thought, really
yeah.
interesting. He stopped he stopped having individual pupils after that, and instead focused on doing the group teaching with the younglings that we see in Clone
Yeah,
Wars.
which probably reminded him of a calmer time. It was probably his way to recenter himself, to work with people that he could feel the hope, he could feel the kindness, and not all of the deceit and everything that comes with adulthood, and trying to figure ourselves out, which again shows me that there was some emotion involved. But I feel like they really taught or they emphasize at least detachment, right? Just completely detached from that, trying to be as present as possible, which I like. It's very Fritz Perl from the Gestalt guy, Gestalt therapy, not Gestalt psychology. He talked about that, and he went to the dark side, I guess, if you want to look at it from what I've read. I could be totally wrong. Sorry, Gestalt guys and gals. But from what I've read, he completely wanted to be completely present. So he started. If his wife was frustrating him, or he didn't want to deal with his kids, he didn't. He just abandoned everybody and anything, because he needed to be at peace with himself. The only thing that mattered, or the only way he could be present, is by completely detaching from anything that goes against his thought processes. And it felt like that's what they were emphasizing, right? But if you really look at it, and that's what I did with with a microscope this time, watching the two that I saw.
Uh-huh.
He was actually more non-reactive than he was detached. He would understand it and not react. He would process first, and then come up with whatever it was. He wasn't ever numb, and that's something that really stood out to me. Like, he'll acknowledge fear, loss, failure, everything that's going with it. But he wasn't ruled by it. Wasn't completely engulfing him and controlling him. And then we have Anakin, that kind of went the other way, right? And he didn't accept the suffering part of life, which again, if you remember any of the other shows that you guys have listened to, I for me, suffering is the byproduct, is the choice. So the pain would have been going through, the loss, going through everything that we go through, or everything that they went through, and then coming out the other end to understand what we can learn from it, how we can grow from it, how we can create an understanding of it. But the Anakin himself sat in suffering, and he didn't get a support system to show him how to sit in pain to come out the other side. But now we got Yoda, that's kind of in his own way, deciding to sit in suffering too, man. And he understands the pain clearly because he's lived through it. Through, again, think of us living in 1125. We understand Rome, and we understand Egypt, and we understand everything and anything that happened in between, and we can understand pain. But we decided, or he decided, that sitting and suffering might have been a little bit more logical, because then we are not emotionally attached to it, that's where the flaw happened. I think that's where we had the problem, which again was for a positive reason. He was trying to protect himself, and trying to protect the order as a whole.
In a way, it's almost like his age kind of worked against him in this
Yes,
aspect, because he'd seen so much, been through so much, and had so much practice at learning to to disattach himself from being emotionally invested in the outcome, or in the individuals concerned, that he got really good at it.
really, really good at it.
And when that happens, it's very easy to want to be able to just say to others who you see are struggling in that same way,
There
just
you go.
do what I did, because this
Hit
worked
fast
for
forward.
me. Hit fast
Yeah,
forward. So uh, when you have that understanding, and you know what they've been through, you want all the more to for them, like in this case, say Yoda to Anakin, for Anakin to learn as you did, because you also know what it's like on the other side of the wall.
right.
You've already passed into the light at the end of the tunnel, but you know what the darkness is like. So you want Anakin to get out, of there himself, and you want to be able to show him how, because you did it, because you went through all that, you struggled through all that, and you learned, and you found the way to that tranquility.
Yeah, you can almost say that he was trying to protect them in his own way.
Absolutely,
And this
absolutely.
is, yeah, this is a pattern that we see a lot, or at least and I'm making assumptions for you, but we've been doing this for a while. People are looking or waiting for an outcome based on their own experiences, and they also get blinded by the idea that everybody thinks the way they do because of their life experience. It's so obvious. It's right here. It's right in front. I'm holding my hands up, and nobody can see that, but I'm pretending like I'm handing something to somebody, and it's right here. How can you not see that? But that's not the case. A lot of people don't have not had the same life experience, so they're not going to come up with the same ideas. And it was again through my own lens. I noticed a lot of like Eastern philosophies through him, a lot of Zen Buddhism, Taoism, and Stoicism. Stoicism was a big one for me that really kind of like echoed this mindfulness from him. Do not do or do not. There is no try. I mean, that's stoicism right there, and it's also very non-attachment, or not non-attached. I don't know. And it's more action over theory, right? It's more mathematical. A plus b equals c. We need to do this in order to avoid that.
Yeah,
But
that's a good word for it, mathematical.
yeah, because it's cut and dry, which I love math. I actually think it's fascinating. I think math can give us the answers to the universe. I really do. I don't understand it. I'm not, other than college level algebra and some statistics. I am not fluent in I don't know, in Big Bang Theory math, but I think it's just so fascinating. I love listening to, or I guess watching to Neil deGrasse Tyson and them talk about theories and mathematical equations. It's incredible to me, but I also see a lot of emotional avoidance even when I hear them talk, because it's the scientific method, right? You do, you prove, and you duplicate. And if you don't have the Holy Trinity, then you don't have anything. So there's no emotion attached. It just is.
And Yoda was long lived enough to really be able to have that philosophy and that method of approach down to a scientific formula at that point. He'd had the time and the practice, and it's worth wondering if I doubt any of his peers asked him this when he was trying to work with Anakin, but I would have been curious what his response would have been if somebody had asked him, could you do what you're asking Anakin to do? Could you have done that when you were, 25 or however old Anakin is at the time of the Clone Wars?
Yeah, I don't know if he would have had a real answer for that. I think we would have got a Yodaism, because I think he understands everything so clearly. He understands the mechanics of it all. But he also doesn't want to, again, be emotionally attached to it. So he's not going to give you a response based on how he feels about it, or how he might think about it based on fears or anything else that creates our own judgment. It's going to be very systematic. It's going to be a response based on patterns, based on behaviors, and natural outcomes. But I think he is capable of it. We see it because he talks about life, talks about death, talks about afterlife, becoming one with the force, accept. He just has a profound acceptance of his own mortality and all of our mortality. But I think that's after seeing death for 900 years, after seeing suffering, love, pain, everything that goes in between, and being detached from it theoretically, but also very um, involved, very aware, I guess is the right word. Um, Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. I think that was a quote
Yeah.
that he had said at one point. I wrote it
That's
down
what he
here.
says to Anakin when Anakin first confides in Yoda, something that at that point I think he's only ever really shared with Obi-Wan, which is
Yeah,
his visions, without being specific, his dreams that Padme is going to die and he's going to be unable to protect her, save her from it happening.
that's when I realized that Yoda's an existential therapist, man.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
it. That was it. As soon as he said that, I thought, oh my gosh, this guy has that point of view, which is, I think it's pretty amazing. At the same time, it can feel kind of bleak, and that's why I bleed it into other theories because most people aren't going to take it specific to say, okay, well that just means be present. That just means be here, and that the knowledge that yes, I think we talked about it before. Our parents are going to die. Our pets are going to die. People are going to pass, and that's just the cycle of life, and it's okay. But being present, we get to experience it, truly be with it, truly feel love, truly feel connection. But when you say something like that to somebody, it feels so dark. It feels like just give up, man. Everything's gonna die. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
no,
it can be overwhelming. I mean, it's
of course.
and for Anakin, as you know, for reasons that we went into last time, it was probably the least helpful thing for him to hear, all things
For
considered,
sure,
because of just
absolutely.
his own makeup and where he was coming from. But that's that's not necessarily Yoda's fault. He's coming
No,
from his philosophy, and Anakin's coming from his, and it's not about right and wrong. It's about
it's
finding
it just
that gray
it just
balance.
is. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
He wants them to confront their fears, but he wants them to let go of control, which is something that we talk about all the time. Be present. We can't control everything. We need to be here. Can we look into the future? Yeah, definitely. We could sit there, we can bathe in it, but then we got to come back. We got to come back here. We can't stay there. We can't stay there and try to direct, I don't know, the plane to not hit anything on the way over there. But we can have some foresight, some idea of, okay, well, I've seen all the worst case scenarios, and I know which way to, swing left or right. Just like we can't stay in the past, but we can go visit because there's so much information back there to get us uh, positively moving in the right direction based on our own experiences and knowledge and everything in between. But again, like you guys are probably sick of me saying it, but it's okay. Here, one more time, but we can't try to change the past in order to control the future because then boom, that's our trauma response. And I think he was well aware of that. But he also was so rigid that we didn't have time to go to the, or he didn't even have time to go to the
Hmm.
past until the end, to learn from it, and he stayed somewhat in the future a little bit too long, is my
Yeah,
opinion.
it's a fine line, but I think you're bang on course here, and to kind of move, to keep the narrative going with our exploration. Yoda, he never his awareness of the past never lessened. It was never he never disconnected from it. But I think you're absolutely right that he didn't really start to truly sit with and apply some of the more painful lessons of the past that he had learned, that he had experienced, firsthand in some cases, until after his self-imposed exile on Dagobah post Order 66 and the rise of the Empire.
Why do you think that is? What do you think that is? Let me, because I have a theory on that, and I wrote
Okay.
it down too. Because I'm glad. I'm so. It's funny that we do this every time. I love the fact that you're going in this direction, but let's sit in that little spot for just a second.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why did that disconnection do it for him? What do you think? And I can give you my theory first if you want. It's up to you.
I'll give you mine and then I'd love to hear
Okay,
yours.
awesome.
I think it was a combination of two things. I think it was one, for all his knowledge and all his wisdom and experience, Yoda was also not immune to the fear and trauma of war, in particular of the Clone Wars. He could withstand it better than any other Jedi in the Order. He could be scared and still think. He could be traumatized and still think and teach and be mindful. But this is something that Dr. Jonathan Shea, when writing about Vietnam veterans and Achilles in Vietnam,
Oh
talks
yeah,
about. no one is immune and no one can resist indefinitely to what war does to the psyche. It's just it's as much a fact of life as that we all die one day. And Yoda, no, he had more resilience than most, he had more tools than most, but he wasn't going to be immune to it as well. And as you said too before, he spent a little bit more time without, on some level, without quite realizing it, in the future than in the present, especially as the Clone Wars drew to their conclusion. He began to sense acutely the growing power of the dark side and the influence that it seemed to have, that now was coming, it was clear, from Coruscant itself. It wasn't some secluded hideaway. It was that the dark side, the force they were fighting so desperately against, was actually apparently taking up residence right next to the Jedi Temple. So
Right.
you had,
Flourishing.
yeah, and flourishing and thriving, ready to snuff the Jedi Order out. And then it happened. And then Order 66 happened. And Yoda survived it, but he was one of the very few who did. And that finally was that was, I think, the first time Yoda was confronted with a truth that he had both failed to foresee, or not maybe failed to foresee, but failed to act on, failed to do what in his eyes would have been a proper proactive or preemptive response to address it. And he was confronted with the realization that, for all his wisdom and all his experience, that was when he realized that he had not been immune to the trauma of the Clone Wars, that he was also just as mortal to it, because he felt on a spiritual level, because of how in tune he was with the Force, he felt every death in Order 66 on some level of his own spiritual essence and psyche. You see it in Revenge of the Sith, that Yoda becomes more and more distraught as each of the other Jedi are brought down by their clone troopers. So his spirit was broken, was shattered by that terrible ordeal, and it didn't break him per se. It didn't break his will, or it didn't, or his ability to function, but it was probably the deepest wound, the emotional wound that
Yeah.
he'd known at that point, which, considering how old he was and everything that he'd been through, it is really saying something. It's kind of, I feel like it's a little tough to word this, but it was that it was a moment of humility for him, that
Profound grief, man.
profound grief and bitter humbling, that for everything that he'd done, for being centuries older than Sidious, the Sith who'd masterminded all this, he was now a victim of all of this, that he'd failed to make or at least in his eyes, that he'd failed to make a difference in preventing this. So that was a long reason, number one, but that's the first of it. And then the second reason was that by going into self-imposed exile on Dagobah, he had nothing but time alone with his thoughts in a way that he'd never had, even when he was living in the Jedi Temple. It was really just him and this desolate swamp world, and nothing to get in the way of having to be with all of these emotions and all of these reflections and this harsh, unrelenting, immutable truth.
Yep. And that's part of where my perspective comes in. I agree with you. I think that was a turning point. I also agree that all the war, all the death, has impacted him throughout his his long life. I also think that when we talk about or look at institutional uh, boundaries, because he was part of a rigid Jedi institution for centuries, and he was taught, or even I would even argue, broken of his perceptions, broken of his ability to be his true authentic self. He adopted their perceptions, their way, just like he was trying to do with Anakin and everybody else. But it worked on him because he believed so wholeheartedly, and logically, it made sense. Again, he's I'm going to call him a mathematician. If you can present to him something that just makes sense, yeah, no, we can't be greedy. We can't fall for love or any of these other emotional situations because they put us at risk to hurt everyone. We don't want anybody to get hurt. We want to protect the world. We want everybody to be happy in their own way. And so we have to be rigid on this like dogmatic, politically entangled perception of the world. So he ran with it because it made sense. And then Anakin's fall, horribly, incredible fall, I guess. He realized that he just completely lost touch with the living force. Because I feel like the force has two sides, right? There's a force of knowledge, rules, structure, everything else, but then there's the living force. That means being completely here, connected, present, feeling all our emotions, feeling everything. And man, I guess in a weird way, we're teaching the force to people as well. Because people, avoid it, or there's a lot of avoidance because of fear of being hurt, of vulnerability. But I always talk about that vulnerability is a superpower because it is. As soon as we can become vulnerable and open, then we can see positive outcomes. Now nobody can hurt us. They can hurt our feelings, but we'll never be crushed. And as he uh, evolves and he gets separated from these constraints and his self-imposed isolation, he has nothing but time to meditate, man. And now he's not part of the structure anymore. And I think that opens up his mind to be able to see things from a different light and see from his, past failures. I'm just going to call him because he even tells Luke, learn from your failures. And which is so insightful. Something that he doesn't really allude to in previous conversations with people,
Yeah,
and he
you're
never told
right.
Anakin that.
It's a really good
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
right, because he stepped forward into another form of consciousness, which was the most open form of consciousness. He was finally completely present, completely open, and it just showed like this growth and this willingness to release his ego, which is so profound. And then he re-examines all his beliefs, which is what we want for progression. Again, we don't want to stay in the past, but we want to visit it. We want to look at it. We want to learn from it. We want to grow, and then be able to move forward into the present with again an open eye for the future. So whoever's listening, that doesn't mean go home, lay down, and oh well, let's see what happens. That means be proactive in your future, but don't stay there. Come back home. Come back here. And let's see what the day is going to bring us. Let's see what the hour is going to bring. Let's see what the minute's going to bring. Let's see what this I don't know next drink of coffee is going to bring me.
Right.
And
When you
and
stop,
for
well,
uh-huh.
because it makes me think of that. When you stop, when you stop trying to control the present based on the future, that's when opportunities that you weren't aware of start to reveal themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
There's a saying that I often, and this is somewhat related, but there's a saying I love to share with clients that's luck is what happens when preparation meets
Oh,
opportunity.
I've heard that a lot. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a perfect saying. Yeah, I like that because it is. It's uh,
It reinforces that same proactive mindset that every, as you said, every second counts. Live life, by the moment, and not succumb to that either that avoidance or that anxiety outlook where you're trying to control the variables based on things that either haven't happened yet or that already happened, which you can no longer change.
right. And yeah, I mean, let's find that middle ground. Let's find the presence. Let's find here to be able to say, okay, I learned from the past. So I know what to try to avoid. And I looked into the future to see what possible pitfalls can be. So now I'm just going to be here and I'm going to be open mind or have an open mind to all these possibilities, but not let them control me. Okay, what about diagnosis, man? I actually struggled with this one. I did, and it could have been our last conversation. I didn't want to give them PTSD, but I don't. I mean, of course, you can make it work with PTSD. But I felt like it was more grief, man. I like a deep rooted grief, survivor's guilt, through vicarious trauma. I felt like that was where my heart sat with him. What are you thinking?
It's so funny. I almost wanted you to say PTSD just so I could disagree with you this
Ah,
time. And I was like, oh, he's gone for grief too. All right.
no,
Yeah.
okay.
But I will say, I will say though, I went a little, I deviated a little bit. I usually like to look for a full criteria diagnosis that I think can be a good solid umbrella, to work with whatever a client's symptoms are presenting as. In Yoda's case, I actually would go light, I think, with this diagnosis. I would say, some grief, some, complex bereavement. I like survivor's guilt, which I think is definitely, I don't, it's, that's not its own diagnosis, I think, unfortunately. But, if there's a Z code for that or a subcategory, we could add that on. I think that's definitely among the closest if we have to assign, a label to it. But I think, any grief or any depression or dysthemia, it would be in the other unspecified. There's no way he's meeting full criteria for that.
No, not at all, not at all. But I think grief, the idea of grief as a diagnosis, I think it encompasses all that without giving him a hard stamp on anything because he doesn't have a hard stamp on anything. When he's training Luke, he's showing emotion. He's asking him to pay attention to his emotions, to pay attention to failure, to pay and using his spiritual depth in his teachings. He's doing all this stuff that shows me that there's evolution, that he's learning, that he's not staying in place when we have maybe this. Let's just go with extreme with dysthymia. There's no growth. There's no future. This is it. This is where we stay. Or severe anxiety, same way. You get stagnant because we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to. We see a lot of perfectionism and everything else. We don't see that with him. So I think yeah, survivor's guilt with a grief ideal or idea. I think that's the best course. And if for any of you listening, sometimes they'll say it's, and I'm just going to make this up, PTSD, unless grief is I don't know, I forgot how they word it, but basically, if there's a big spotlight on grief, then it's not PTSD. So yeah, that's what I think. So how about treatment?
I have to ask you actually if you feel
Okay,
like starting because
yeah,
you're the Gestalt expert. You're the existentialist. This is your territory. Would you take that approach with him?
I would start with narrative therapy with him, man. And I love Gestalt, and I thought about getting certified. I just, and this is gonna sound horrible. I just don't want to pay the $5,000 to get certified, man. I read a lot of books, and I talk to as many people as I can. And if somebody wants to give me what do you call those, a scholarship to their program, I will do it, and I will talk about Gestalt all day for you. I will be your spokesperson. So I would invite him to tell his story, man. The Jedi history, his own emotional journey, because now he's starting to be open through, for it, through war, failure, rebirth, all that, and then kind of like explore his legacy, because I think he has always thought about the legacy of the Jedi Order, but I want to hear it from his perspective. And he's going to give me a hard time because he's always going to go back to what it means, the legacy for the greater good. But I want to kind of narrow him down. Now, I would also do some shadow work, some Jungian stuff. So I would kind of just explore the control, the rigidity, the emotional repression, and kind of have him name that part of him, because I don't think it's him, man. I think because when we see the evolution, we see that he's really breaking through his shackles and he's being finally centered to himself. And I want him to name this other version of his shadow self because that was created that was created over centuries of training, man, over centuries of really just kind of slamming them down and creating that version of him. I want him to kind of see how the shadow self can be integrated between the light and the dark, and himself within the force, and then validating all the humanity and everything behind all the mysticism. Create that balance, right? Um, More existential stuff, like spiritual direction, what is the cost of wisdom, stuff that he would kind of geek out about, because he's very he likes to everything, is very what's the name of that show, the theme, dun, 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 dun.
Oh,
uh
Jeopardy.
Jeopardy, everything's a question,
Oh
so
yeah,
I would I would give him questions for him to geek out on, and ask him what's the cost of wisdom. How do you hold hope through centuries of loss? Sorry, I'm trying to find the. I know I had three or four.
that's pretty good. I
What
mean, that's a
what
solid start.
yeah, what does it serve when the old ways have failed? That was the one that really stood out to me in my mind, because it connects what I'm thinking, is that this was his structure. It kept him safe. It kept him feeling good about himself and about what they were doing. But it was flawed. And I think he's always known it was flawed. And it was not until his exile, until he was able to figure out to say, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I've been going about this wrong. Yeah, and I would just kind of I would ask I would ask less of him and just be a lot more present. I would listen a lot more. I would try to encourage him to open up, which is going to be hard, because he's not an open guy. But silence, as we've learned, can elicit a lot of conversation. So I would just try to work slowly with him, because I know he thinks in layers, and so do I, which is so crazy. So I think it would be so much fun. We talked about onions last time, and I really do see that. I see that that things don't happen, within our purview. Things happen in layers from different angles, and it's all connected, and it all has something that that works. And just holding space for his growth, because 900 years of experience and growth. Wow, that's a lot of layers. All right, so what are you thinking?
I like some of what you said. I think that the doing more listening than talking, because usually, usually Yoda's a character of few words. He's a being of minimal speech. Poignant but brief comments. He's not one to go on long personal tangents or deep dives, at least about himself. As typical conversation with him tends to go. So I agree. Establishing that from the outset, and the way to do that could be through asking more questions. The way to do that could also be initially meeting him where he's at and having some sessions that are more meditation and reflection based.
Mm,
Since
okay.
as a Jedi, he's well practiced in that, and he might feel a little more open to having some of those deeper sharing sessions about himself.
Whew.
If
I,
the
I'll
if
have
the
to refer him out, man. I am not a meditator. I wish I struggle with meditation, but yeah, I could see how that would help a lot.
being it, because I want to be careful not to let our sessions turn into him being the instructor. I don't want to. I don't want to have a competition with him. But who knows more? It's not what I'm saying. But I also want to be mindful that he's viewing this time together as a place for him to share, if he wants to. But still, that is the option, and that it's hopefully in his best interest if he takes advantage of that opportunity. That this isn't about him. uh, this isn't he doesn't have to be the teacher here necessarily, to get the most out of our time together. And that's not to say I have to be the teacher too. This is more about us just
No,
sharing the space together.
but
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, but even I worked with somebody, and I'm not gonna say what their degree was in, but they were a therapist, one of the various types. anyways, they came to me. They had me. I think they at that time they were like 33 years of practicing or something deep, something long. You know, it wasn't about because yeah, they could teach me a ton of information towards the system, right? But it was really giving them space to see what they weren't talking about, what they weren't thinking about, and asking them questions that they're not used to hearing, and giving them opportunities to just talk. And through that, they know what they're doing. They know what they're processing. They know where you're taking them. They know, and if they're trusting you, they start opening up, and then they have those aha moments. You know, this person, they let's call them they were shocked when they would have those aha moments, and they would even say, "Man, I never saw it that way before. I've never looked at it that way. I never thought of it from that angle." So it's not about me teaching or them teaching or anything. It's about giving a fresh perspective on something that they've been seeing, and maybe, and let's give them the benefit of the doubt. 20 different ways. Guess what? I just showed you the 21st or the 23rd or 28th or whatever it might be. But that opens up everything because now they can add from their life experience and everything else the other 40 perspectives.
Right.
And so now we open up all these portals into possibilities, and that's the magic I'm looking for.
I like that a lot. Yeah. I would.
What's your Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead.
I was going to say my own version of that. I think, in a way, something I'd be interested to do with him is create sort of a timeline of his of the changes and evolution of his teaching style over the centuries, whether it's verbal or written or whatever format it takes. I think that that could be a helpful way for him to you sort of combine psychodynamic with narrative so that he's able
Yeah,
to use the past in a constructive way to track his own journey, his own evolution, and look at all the ways that his outlook has been affected and changed over the years. Because I think that would be helpful for him because then he could start to notice all the little things that he might not have fully appreciated before in terms of how they've actually shaped some of the later decisions or conclusions he's come to in a way that would be constructive, in a way that would allow him to, as you said, find that 41st perspective, find
that's it.
that new outlook now as he proceeds.
Open up all the doors and windows, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
and for me, I think the narrative, I don't want to say obviously, but for me, nothing written. We need to sit down and talk.
Yeah,
I think he is at that part or within his journey that he needs to process out loud because he processes out loud in his head all day, every day. And for him to speak, there's something about saying things out loud that just changes the whole dynamic of it. It helps you make sense of something that doesn't even make sense, and also creates again, shortcut to be able to see how maybe what you were thinking doesn't make sense. Because once you say it out loud, you're like, wait a minute, that's not what I meant. What about long term vision? I'm thinking I want him to be a teacher of healing, and not just discipline, a mentor, just like he was for Luke, that honors emotions, not detachment, and then a witness for the full force of the Force, which he does, man. You see it with Ray, both the light and the dark side, the love and the fear, and then and life and death, which he talks about a lot.
I like that. Similar. I would work with him. Long term goal. I would hope that he's able to find a greater balance between being able to honor the individual as well as the large scale or the collective, where the galaxy is concerned. Because I think in some respects that was where some of his own misguidance or oversight came into play, especially back at the end of the Clone Wars, was a lot of what he was, the line that he was running with was a lot of it was for the sake of the Republic, for the sake of the Order. A lot of these groups, these these faceless entities. But it was really where the injury, where the pain, where the change and the difficult truths to swallow came from, had more to do with the actions and emotions of individuals rather than groups of people. So finding, and I'm not saying convert to individualism, more find a new balance that honors both, that allows there to be room for both.
Yeah, the
as
balance.
a teacher,
Balance in the force.
Balance in the force. Yeah. And I noticed this as we were talking today. I love it when this happens. You were talking earlier about how he learns to be more acknowledging of emotions in his teaching style with Luke. There's a great example of that when he says to Luke, when Luke has the vision of his friends Leia and Han Solo in pain, in a bad situation in Cloud City, and he wants to know what's going to happen. Are they going to die? And Yoda says, "It's difficult. Always emotion is the future, never certain." Whereas flashback all the way to Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, there Yoda and several other senior council members are consulting with Palpatine and several senators of the Republic. And he's asked, I think it's Palpatine who asks him, if as the more and more star systems defect to the Separatist Union away from the Republic, do you really think we're on the brink of war here? And Yoda just says, the dark side clouds everything, impossible to see. It's just flat. I don't know, yeah. So there, beautiful evolution.
Yeah, it's cool because at the end, and this is kind of my last thought on it all, man, is that he finally figures it out, and he also figures out that his greatest gift to humanity or to the Order or to wherever you want to look, it's not really his power, although he's he's a little beast. It's like his willingness to own his stuff, to admit he's wrong, and be comfortable in the emotions of it, and to keep teaching anyway, to still want to connect and be better for everyone and for himself. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I saw.
I agree so much. That was I think what really got me in the feels when I was doing my research on Wikipedia, was that he hit that low point briefly when after he came to Dagobah, and Obi-Wan's spirit actually approached him and asked him in advance if he could tell Luke about Yoda's whereabouts and instruct him to seek him out. And Yoda initially refused. He's saying, I don't think that's a good idea. I think the galaxy is better off without me at this point. Look what happened, after I tried to be the perfect teacher. Avoidance. Yeah.
Avoidance.
Yeah. And I want to make sure I get this point in too. This goes back a little bit earlier. Yoda also, I think, was struggling to realize that he had more in common with the dark side than he would have liked to admit, because even though his belief in the light never wavered once throughout his career, his knowledge of the dark side ran deeper than almost any other Jedi. In some respects, deeper than Anakin. I mean, Yoda had encounters with dark side figures. He went to places strong in the dark side force. He communed with spirits of the ancient Sith. He actually had a showdown with a ghost, with a sort of a spiritual ghost manifesting as Darth Bane centuries after the original Bane died. That was actually, I think that might have been how Yoda learned about the rule of two, now that I think about it. So Yoda knew about the dark side, but but unlike Anakin, his devotion to the light never wavered. But what he kind of had to realize, what he was yet another truth that sort of hit him in the face after Order 66, was that he had become almost the unofficial face for everything the Jedi stood for, in just the same respect that Sidious was doing so for the Sith. He'd become an extreme, an expression of absolutes that he himself knew in his heart was not the right approach. So when he was able to finally realized that actually there was, for all his knowledge, for all his experience, there was still more lessons to be learned, and also for him to teach. It just it was so beautiful to read that he could have that experience again of relearning and of seeing the new path open to him, and then at that point he was ready to teach Luke, and to teach Luke in the way that Luke needed to be taught.
Right, which is, I'm going to argue, the right way, man. The most grounded way. Without, like you said, without darkness there is no light. We need the balance. Without light there's no darkness. Man, amazing character.